Now I can start talking because we're recording. All right, so this is our second Div Ops Hangout. Of course, last time it was Kyle and I talking about Eventbrite a little bit. We'll probably host again at some point in the future, but I wanted to give other teams a chance to talk so that it's not just the Kyle and Jonathan show through this the whole time. Because I want to hear, and plus, like, I'm dying to hear what's going on at all your guys' companies and you guys and gals companies and see what's going on. So, yes, this week we have the real MVP, Ben MVP, Ben Allegro. He might make us all do squats. I'm not sure. Do you make us do squats even in meetups?
Nah.
No squats.
Conference only.
Conference only. Okay.
I've done it virtually though. At a conference talk.
You're getting some weird audio from you, but you might be.
I am.
Yeah, it sounds popcorny. Maybe switch to your.
Firefox don't like each other.
Not surprised. Those are two conflicting things. It looks like paradoxical. Using the Google product on a little browser. If you need to switch back to Chrome, don't worry. You can do that. We can talk for a few minutes or something. Hey, girls.
Okay,
Girls.
Okay, I'll try that.
Girls, keep it down just a little. I'm on call. Okay. Anything been interesting going on in anybody else's world? Mark, Travi? Or I meant Mark, Matt, Julie. I don't think I've met you yet, Julie. I don't think you were at our first meetup. Hello and welcome.
I worked with Ben, and he noted he was speaking today, so I was like, I'm interested.
Yeah, Ben is
my first week, so I just joined Stitch Fix like a month ago.
Well, welcome to both Stitch Fix and the Div Ops Hangout. I've had fun so far. I have 16 tickets sold to this thing, so maybe I should like ping that channel and be like, hey y'all, we're hanging. We're hanging. People wanted to come.
Not much over here. Posted in the channel. I started for work looking into Cypress integrations with some visual testing with Percy. So I'm kind of
nice.
Been running with that lately.
So I saw your message about that. That's interesting. Percy, you said it was called?
Yeah, I'm looking at Percy first. It seems to be the biggest one right now. There's a bunch of other ones that I'll do some kind of comparisons with. Maybe I'll have something to share with the group once I've done.
Yeah, that'd be great.
POCs.
We're just using Cypress for just like all the things right now.
Yeah.
Like actual visual regression. But that's something we've wanted to do for a while too. That visual regression stuff. Granted, like, God, I have so much other crap going on.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But that being said, that is good to know that I have someone else trying it so that we can find out what you've learned. Because we have an internal style guide, and it was in its own repo. And Alex and I are in the process of migrating away from Jenkins into Circle CI. But since our registry is in another repo hosted on this like crazy Reggie thing, I wanted to see if I would trigger Ben by saying Reggie. It's a
how about now?
There you go. That's better. Okay. Much better. It's Barrett. A wild Barrett has appeared just in time to hear Ben talk.
Anyway, congratulations.
Good to see you. Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I was just filling him in on. Mark was mentioning that he's using something called Percy for visual regression testing. I was like, ooh, that sounds pretty sweet. And we're in the process of switching over to Circle and having to kill all these old dependency managers. And once we're done, it'd be nice to have something like a Percy to do the testing over our style guide system. So I'll have to add an investigation for that into our GitHub backlog. We're using GitHub projects as our sprint backlog right now. It's pretty interesting. All right, sweet. Thank you again, Ben. Welcome back to Chrome. You got out of Firefox there? Okay. Firefox was not agreeing with Google Meet. All right, sweet.
I
go
closed all my tabs just for you all.
Oh man, that's a
open them
huge
back
deal
up,
for
yeah.
this guy.
Yeah.
He's that like you can't even ever read the titles on the pages.
All my
All right, go ahead, Ben. Take us away. Thank you for volunteering to talk about Stitch Fix. I'm excited to hear what you guys are working on.
Yep. I don't know, Julie, if you introduced yourself. I work with Julie at Stitch Fix.
Yeah,
I did while you
Okay.
were sorting out your technical.
Figuring it all out.
Yeah, I keep
Yes.
muting
Okay.
myself because I'm like shoving cereal into my face and didn't want to make people watch.
Okay, let's see if I can. Google Chrome would like to record this computer screen. Okay, so I had to give Chrome authority to record the screen, and it says I have to quit it, start it over again.
It lies. You should
It's
be able to
okay.
just try again.
Okay.
Try
no.
it again. It will
You
work.
gave him authority. That's it. They've got all your data.
Okay.
now.
Let's see.
All your base are belong to us.
Yeah. Okay, is that working?
Yes.
Yep.
awesome.
Let's see. Okay. Here is my fancy slide presentation. Watch, you guys are going to be amazed. So I'm just giving a high-level overview of things. We can go into all the details. I didn't spend a crazy amount of time on this, so it can be more conversations. But I've been at Stitch Fix for a little under a year, so a lot of the stuff in the beginning that I'm going to talk about predates me. But our backend is in Rails, Ruby on Rails,
That's
and
exciting.
we had this huge monolith that took up the whole world and existed. And I used to think monoliths were terrible, but then I realized that's how good companies start and move quickly by having huge monoliths, no matter what the tech is in. So ours was in Rails, and the story goes, teams were growing, 30, 40 engineers maybe, and it couldn't move fast enough. And it was slowing everybody down. Somebody's working on the front end, and all of these back end tests are failing, and all of these interconnected dependencies and such. So the first plan was to move into microservices. So they took all of the kind of DB access and stuff like that and moved those into their own services. So all of the UI was still in the monolith, but the services were starting to get pulled out. Jonathan, you're going to say something? Okay. Yeah. So all the services were getting pulled out, and then they started focusing on the UI. So it got broken out into a whole bunch of separate repos, basically. So all the services were their own repos, but all the UI pieces are their own repos. So up at the top, we still have the monolith. It still exists. It'll likely always exist. But then there are other apps, micro apps as we call them, which are Rails, React hybrids. So Rails is still like the server and what renders out the page, and then once the page is rendered, then React takes over. So some of them have more Rails than others. Like some of them will still make service calls on the Rails side, gather up a whole bunch of data, put them on the window object, and then the React will spin up from there. But most of them now are getting smaller and smaller on the Rails side, and the React side is getting bigger. So there's this library called Webpacker, which is built by the Rails community, which connects Rails with Webpack, and then you can use it for Angular, React, and a whole bunch of other technologies as well. So we use the React one, of course. And it does a whole bunch of magic under the hood. It's like, imagine combining the magic of Rails with the magic of Webpack together in that system. So, we're starting to understand it more and more, how it all works. But anyway, so each one of these...
Hey Ben,
Yeah,
quick question.
go ahead.
Are any of these like server-side rendering with React, or are they all just hydrated like from a UI standpoint library?
So they're all hydrated on the client side right now. We are
Okay.
just now introducing Node into our stack, but that's actually for GraphQL that we're working on it. So we have a GraphQL server that we're building, but until recently, Node wasn't part of it, so there was no server-side rendering yet. But if you look at Stitch Fix, I don't know, 90% of the apps are logged in pages as well. So SEO and speed isn't as crucial. And in general, performance hadn't been a priority, I guess I'll say, until relatively recently there. Yeah, so then there's this one in the center here that you see that has a huge React logo, small Rails. So that is the actual logged out set of pages or the marketing pages. So if you go to stitchfix.com or stitchfix.com/women, like all those landing pages are, what do you call it? Pre-built pages. So it's kind of like Gatsby, but we effectively created our own lightweight Gatsby. Because apparently at the time, we used Gatsby at first, but then this was like maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. We were kept running into problems with it, and we just decided to kind of roll our own static generator with Webpack tools and stuff like that. So that's all pre-built sites as well. We're also wanting to move more towards just like standard create React app, all front end APIs.
I'll do that in a minute.
Type, but we're not quite
I'll do it in a minute. It's okay. When we do it, yes.
So then we have all of these things. We have a header and footer, which is a separate repo. Library of just React components that then the monolith consumes, all of the other apps consume into their UI and whatnot. And then in the reality, all of these separate repos, so this is probably like, I don't know, 17 repos that are here. We also have other like helper component repos as well. So there's one for let's say the shipping and payments UI, or the shipment form React component is in a repo, and then that's in a couple of different other apps and such. So
hey Ben,
the way
sorry, I might have missed this, what you talked about. Are you using a Lerna or something like that to run the micro repos, or?
No, so these are literally separate GitHub repos.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is that so Stitch Fix, organizational wise, like I guess there was, I don't know, PTSD from the monolith, I guess I'll say, where they're like, we don't want to have anything to do with anybody else. Our team is going to be completely self-sufficient. We're going to own our own stack. We're going to be able to move at our own pace. We have our own Circle CI config. We deploy immediately when we merge. Like none of that cross dependency. And it's worked really well, actually, because teams have that autonomy to ship whenever, deliver whenever, and there's less cross communication there. And as you can see, there are more libraries there. So we have 50 different repos that encompass all that makes up Stitch Fix. And if you look at the UI side, it's probably half of that, maybe 20, 25 or whatever. So the problem is that having UI consistency across this and front-end infra consistency is not possible. We have our own
Girls, stay in here, please.
Group, kind of like a guild for front-end engineers where we try to disseminate information, but none of that stuff, not all of it gets into all the different places, right? And not everybody likes Div Ops or wants to deal with Div Ops and such, so it's it can be a maintenance trouble. So then the first thing that came about is this style system. This is when I just joined last year. So it was purely Sass mixins for common components like buttons and text and other things, inputs and stuff like that. So then all the other different apps could start using those. So at least we can try to have some visual consistency around that. And then I started building out our component library that was in React and TypeScript that wraps that style system so that people could just use React components directly instead of having to create their own React components and then style it in Sass.
I assume that's probably using the .sass Sass as well from the Rails community, or did they do SCSS?
Oh, we're using SCSS.
Oh, they are? Okay, good. Yeah,
actually,
a lot of Rails shops went with the SASS Sass because it didn't have any curly braces, which felt more familiar to Rails folks. But I'm glad that they didn't.
We went with SCSS.
That sounds like such a minor thing, but it's like a massive like cognitive switch to like go from CSS with curly braces to not. It just like messes with your head.
I know.
Thank God you didn't have to deal with that.
I need my curly braces.
I did too, man.
So all of these sit on top of these microservices that are in the bottom. The microservices. So, one other thing to note about the apps is that each app has its own API layer. So there wasn't like a shared API. Each one of them had their own kind of API endpoints that then talk to the underlying Rails microservices. That's changing too. We're moving towards a shared GraphQL layer, but I'm not getting into that part yet because that's still kind of like active development. So, like you can think about, every one of these apps has its own Babel config, its own ESLint config, its own Prettier config, its own Jest config, its own Webpack config, like all of these things, right? And if we try to add anything new to the
I'm not
system,
sure where.
like,
I can look in a minute.
let's add the ability to import SVGs.
If it's gone, we'll make another one.
We have to go through all of the Babel configs to make sure that they are correct in order to do this sort of thing. And all of them are different, obviously, because they were made at different points in times, but like different for no real reason. They're just different, right? So the last thing I wanted to talk about was this thing we're called FE Infra, this package, which is it's a collection of
so familiar sounding.
Exactly. I wanted to actually name it Div Ops, but I got shot down really hard.
We sort of shot ourselves down on it too. I don't know. It's more of a cute, like fun thing than it is like, I don't know. I don't know, but I agree.
I was trying to make it real, but no.
No, it's good.
We just named it what it is. It's front end infra. But it's a collection of configs, basically, is all it is. A collection of configs. Your Jest config, your Babel config, your ESLint config, et cetera, et cetera. And it has all of the dependencies in it as well. So the necessary version of Babel and Jest that you need for this config to run. So then what the apps end up doing, this is kind of should have put some lines in there, but I did this like 15 minutes before this. This slide, other ones I prepared. But anyway, so the apps, ESLint RC will import the ESLint configuration from FE Infra and then just module that exports ESLint. They can extend it, to add in additional rules if they would like. But the idea is that, here is listed 8 configurations right here that teams had to maintain themselves, but now they're extending this way. So this is kind of a first pass. The ideal is to have something more like Create React App where the actual command is in the package. But this is kind of like a first pass where we can make some huge headway and see what it looks like. So far it's been working really well, actually. We've been slowly migrating. Yeah.
Ben, do you host like your own npm registry then in Stitch Fix, or how do you install the?
So we have private npm. So I didn't show all of the namespaces and stuff where that stuff goes. Jonathan decided to record this, so I have to make sure I'm on. I don't reveal any secrets.
No trade secrets.
Anyway, none of this is really a secret. But yeah, we have private npm. We also use Artifactory as well, but that's a different department.
Both. So, like for front end, you use both, or just across Stitch Fix? You just have both. Okay.
Across Stitch Fix. So we have engineering as well as
interesting.
What are they called? The data science. Okay. Algorithms. And algorithms uses Artifactory. Engineering uses.
That makes me feel a little bit better because there was a little bit of like back and forth. There's this new AWS offering called Code Artifact, and our backend team started using it because GitHub Packages doesn't support Python yet, and we really wanted to use GitHub Packages. Of course, we still haven't even used GitHub Packages yet, but we decided to pivot away from them, and it felt kind of weird, like not choosing the tool that other people are using, but it sounds like that's not necessarily an uncommon pattern.
Well, I mean, we already have I think our Ruby gems are on Artifactory, and we're on private NPM, so.
Yeah. Cool. Interesting.
Again, that's kind of like been the mantra, I guess, or how Stitch Fixes works is like, different groups use different tools to solve their problems. So
I like that mantra.
There's different organizations. It works well in some places, but then consistency is a problem. So that is the architecture at a high level. And then if there are like any details, I can go into those, but that's kind of where we're at with things.
Nice. So how are you,
Can
guys?
you talk about?
Yeah, go ahead, Barrett.
Sorry. Just like real quick, I know you're still working on it. GraphQL. Are you planning on doing like Apollo Federation or anything in particular?
Yes. So that's what we're working on right now. Is Apollo Federation. So it's actually coming from the back end side more than the front end side, the Federation part. So that's why we have the node, introducing node. So it will federate Rails APIs basically. So individual teams will be able to, I believe, still have their own GitHub repos and write their own Rails parts in that part, and then there'll be something that will validate what they've done against the overall schema and fail in CI if it's breaking stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna just ask if you make like a change to the Babel or ESLint config, what are you guys doing to make sure that the teams like actually use it?
Yeah, so we have Dependabot set up in our repos, at least most apps do. So that tells people every 2 weeks, here are the things that are out of date, you got to update. And there's been a pretty good consistency in teams doing that. So we're hoping to piggyback on that.
Nice.
Can you talk a bit about like you mentioned Jest, but like Storybook or Cypress and kind of that side of the tooling house?
Yeah, so for the component library, we use Storybook for the documentation. Docs for components are near to my heart, Barrett, as we know, working towards that in EDS and building all that. So Storybook's actually worked pretty well in that case. But then as a result of that and people seeing it, more teams have now added Storybook for their Eventbrite design system, EDS. I have been adding Storybook to their apps as well, because before that, teams had to develop their components while running the portion of the site locally, which is like a nightmare. And teams are realizing more that they just want to build those components in isolation, which has been super helpful and a lot faster. And
I will help you with the box later. I gotta do this call till 12.
The algorithms department built this. So I'll say it's Stitch Fix algorithms and
it's only 30 more minutes.
Are like completely
only
different.
30 more
it's
minutes.
Like to each other, we're like benevolent third parties. I'll say that's like how separate it is.
No. What are you doing?
But they built this system of like GitHub Pages or Netlify, where it's internally hosted, but it's behind the VPN so that we can push whatever static front-end assets we want. So now, basically with that, I was able to create this. Have you ever used Netlify deploy previews? Where you deploy something to Netlify, you get to see preview before it actually NPR in the pull request before it's merged. So we built something similar to that as well, and we can use that with Storybook. So now team pushes a component up or changes, we pull request, we can review it and see what it looks like before it actually merges in.
This is on a component by component basis from Storybook, basically.
This is because the storybook is just static assets. If you make changes to React and there's a story behind it, you can now preview and see that change before it actually merges in.
Do you happen to know what the hosting model there is? Like, are they just shoving them into like an S3 bucket that's got like AWS credentials, or is it actually being hosted in a container somewhere?
I've been looking at the code because I'm trying to fix this caching bug with it. But it's a server that's running, so an Express server that's running somewhere, and it goes and it reaches for the data in GitHub, grabs the stuff, caches it locally in some kind of memory cache, and then serves it out as the response to an Express server. It's actually pretty lightweight. It's like one file.
Rendering the Storybook components on the fly.
It's rendering HTML and JavaScript. It's serving HTML and JavaScript and CSS.
Yeah, it's probably calling the build storybook, right? Because when you have the you can do the build storybook, and it builds it, spits it out, just static HTML. CSS.
So they're programmatically calling build storybook, basically.
Oh, so sorry. The CI step called build storybook pushes it to a branch in GitHub, and then now this system that I'm talking about, you just point it to a GitHub branch, and it serves that branch.
And it grabs the content from the branch and returns it back.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's actually really
very clever.
It's really because they use it because they need the data scientists need to be able to preview whatever data science thing they built. I forgot what they're called, algorithms or something. Whatever it is they do.
Machine learning, neural network, something.
There's a UI team that builds visualizations of their stuff for them. So it's like a quick throw it up there, let's see what it does. Okay, try it out. But we've now repurposed it for like engineering flows and such.
Can you speak to the deployment process that happens?
For that?
It's just basically the small repos you have. Do they deploy at any time, or how does that happen?
Yeah, so they're on demand whenever you merge to master. Then there's a deployment process, and that gets out. So
you guys are deploying multiple times a day or whatever that goes to the testing.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's some apps that say, hey, deploy within these or merge within these hours, so that you're not trying to debug things after hours. But for the most part, free to deploy.
So going back to Storybook for a second, you've got this comment on a PR saying like, hey, check this out. This is the built changes. Are teams expected to like click through and then remember what it used to look like?
Oh, how to compare it?
Yeah, like are you doing visual regression testing?
So two things. So one is that this system runs on every branch that's pushed to origin, right? So it just so happens that a PR is tied to a branch. So as a result, when you merge to master also generates this thing every time. So the URL /master is always the latest code version of the storybook. So if you wanted to, you could do a diff between what's on master, what's in this PR, and take a look to see what's changed. So that way somebody can look at it. Also, apps do have Percy snapshots set up as well, which as somebody who pretty much only refactors other people's code with infrastructure, having those Percy snapshots is like super helpful. It gives me confidence that I didn't break their stuff. So yeah. It can be really flaky though, especially when you get to animations and stuff like that happen or things. So there are a lot of, we don't make the Percy snapshots prevent merging, but people always want to make sure that it's passing and such. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. I was telling John before you joined.
Yep.
Very cool. I know I have like a million questions. What? How are the apps? Are they containerized with like? How are the front end asset apps like getting deployed to production?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that part is I haven't
Yeah.
had to dive into it. So we have this tool that does the deployments, and all of the static assets are pushed to S3. I know that for sure. But how the
Facto.
Rails code gets exactly to the servers, I'm not quite sure. We built this whole internal thing to do it and manage it.
Yeah. Well, it
as
helps
well.
that you don't have to do server-side
But-
rendering, so you don't have to worry about all that. So basically, your Rails app just gets Railsified, production
Yeah.
Rails bundle, bundle exec, rake deploy something.
Probably. Something
Yeah,
along those
and then
lines.
just pulls your assets from the URL from that build.
Yeah.
So you're kind of vanilla in that sense, which is nice.
Yeah.
Are you guys doing any automatic TypeScript interface generation from like the Rails or the API like shape?
We're doing it for GraphQL. So, yeah, all of the GraphQL
Incredible.
queries create. Well, actually, I should say not TypeScript because we're not using TypeScript in that code yet. But we're doing automated GraphQL schema validation. I'll say to validate that the queries are correct. We're doing automated React prop type generation from TypeScript for the component library, because only the component library is in TypeScript. Everything else is still in JavaScript. For API validation, there's this thing called Julie, do you remember what it's called? This for the packs. It's called packs. I think it may have come from Rails or whatever, but it's called consumer-driven packs. They're kind of annoying, honestly. But what it is that the consumer, which would be the front end, says basically writes tests that say when I get this from the server, this is what I will render. Or when I make this request to the server, this is the response I expect to get back. And then the API reads those packs that it generates and then runs tests against those. So that's kind of how they assure that they are the same. But it's kind of not the greatest.
Have you had to deal with updating the header or footer?
Oh yeah, so that's painful. Julie just had to go through it just now.
I can imagine.
And we haven't figured out a good way of it. So, like for instance, well, Julie, I don't know. Maybe you can share what you are going through right now, and I'll add more color.
Yeah, I think my specific situation was also tricky because like me I'm still new, and so I made a pull request for a version change and missed something, and so then another coworker put out a version, and then I was trying so we ended up having some stuff where it's like, oh no, we have two people who are trying to get versions out together, and so we had to kind of collaborate. But a lot of it is just we have a little script that at least automates sending a common pull request to all the various front end repos to say, hey, update to this version, but then you might need to help all those teams who own those different things. Oh, this is what I changed. Here's some stuff you should consider, and getting all those people to review and all that stuff. And so, yeah, it's a little tedious.
Yeah.
And are you trying to coordinate merging at the same time across all those repos?
No, not really. There's the understanding that just things are going to be different across. There's the desire, obviously, for it to be the same, but kind of having Stitch Fix is anti-coordination, I guess, in terms of not in the concept, but in reality, it's really hard to have that coordination because teams really want to be autonomous. So
that is one thing that I think the monorepo here has helped a lot with is if you are changing something that a lot of apps depend on, an automatic part of the process is that it bumps all those apps.
Yeah. So it leaves it on the teams to do the verification and the work. Because, for instance, Julie made a change to the header, and bumped the version of the component library it was using because there was a bug in our font. And she fixed the font, then fixed the component library, but the header hadn't been updated to use the new version of the component library. So as a result of the new version of the header, teams also should probably use the new version of the component library as well. So now this isn't just like a simple PR. It's like, oh, just get the new version of the header. It'll be fine. It's like you also have to bump the version of the component library. So you need to verify stuff is working, right? So it's on the teams basically to make that. So we get that autonomy, but then like cross app changes are really.
How do teams know when there's a newer version than what they're using?
So that's the benefit, is that like unless you need the new version of the component library, you don't need the new version of the component library. So the component library uses something called semantic release, a library that will whenever you push a new change to master, we'll cut a new release of the package and then update the GitHub releases tab, so they can see all the things that have changed. So when they do need something, they can see changes. But until you need it,
how do they manage the technical debt of being on an older version then?
It's like I was saying, they use Dependabot. So Dependabot will bother them every 2 weeks, and teams have been pretty good at responding to that.
Yeah,
so you mentioned those coming every 2 weeks. Have you looked into Renovate at all? The reason I mentioned that one, I really like that in there you can actually filter by scope. And so one thing I've done in the past is like 4-hour internal scope, set it up to be like live PRs. But then like all the third-party stuff, go ahead and let it update less frequently. So if notifying teams would be helpful, that might be something that could be useful.
Ooh,
thanks. Much doing that for myself.
Also, since you mentioned semantic release, I'll throw out to the group. I happen to be a core maintainer of semantic release, so if anybody ends up using that one and has questions along the way, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help.
Hey.
I wish I could have reached out to you like 2 weeks ago. I had lots of questions. I was trying to semantically release a library that had both a Ruby gem and a npm package, and I wanted them to be the same version. So I was kind of making a lightweight version of what's it called? The thing that you were just mentioning, Mark.
Percy?
Manager. What'd you say?
Renovate?
No, before that.
Lerna,
it manages multiple packages at the same time.
Lerna, yeah.
Probably
Lerna.
Yes. I was trying to do like a lightweight version of Lerna. It was just 2 packages. So I ended up getting semantic release to work and how to configure it and everything, but I had to look at source code to figure out how some stuff works.
Sure. Yeah.
Ooh, there's a GitHub action for Renovate, Alex says, which is great. Thank you for pointing that out. Ooh.
I mean, it's a GitHub app, so you can attach it to your account, and it works just like Dependabot or Circle CI, apparently.
Open a bright tech ticket.
With it.
That's awesome. What other questions do I have? Do you have a sense for? You said something that as you move to Node, more teams are going to maybe look into server-side rendering. Has there been any discussions about how you'll handle that? And that's one question. And then permit me to ask one more, which is...
Claire, could you ask the question again? I was listening to Frozen.
Oh, yes.
That's
actually Moana. That's the scene when Moana is grabbing the heart of the ocean.
Oh, Moana, yes. Moana,
yes,
sorry.
Moana.
It is Moana.
Yes, it is Moana. Sorry about that. So, yes, question is, if you have thought of your plan for server-side rendering as A, and then B, my question is, how are, if you know, you may not know, but at the when a request comes into the site, how are you determining which app gets the traffic? Is it just like an Nginx up front and then it goes through? Or do you even know that? I'm just curious if you know.
Yeah, there's something, I'm not sure if it's Nginx that determines the routes but there is something I have had to update the routes config to go from one app to another because we moved some stuff out of the monolith to a different app and
Everly,
changed some routes.
Everly, off the Google, please.
But we use something. I'm not sure if it actually is updating a Nginx config or not, but it's effectively like the same thing though.
So you had just like a big routing file that just says this route goes over to this app. Okay, got it.
Yeah. We use a CLI to update it, so that's why I don't know what's behind it. But
ooh, interesting.
We built this whole CLI to manage all of the deployment and stuff like that. So
I love me a good CLI.
It's kind of gnarly. They're building a UI in front of it because the CLI is so complicated. It can do so many different things.
So it sounds like you have like a back-end version of yourself.
Yeah, so there is a developer experience team. There's a whole platform group, and then they have 3 parts of them, and one of them is developer experience.
Everly, come out here, please.
My team is actually Julie and I, and then some others are actually the platform team of just the customer-facing side of the business. So there's other parts that's like manufacturing and styling and such that are parts of engineering as well. So we're just customer facing.
Kyle, I see the chin stroke.
Yeah. So what was the first question?
Do you have a plan or a thought on server-side rendering? What you're going to do there to attack that problem?
Right now, when we get to it, we have bigger fish to fry. But maybe look into using Next to see how it handles it.
So in that sense, do you think you'll separate the apps, the front-end apps, from the Rails, or will you just figure out how to like shove Next into the Rails app?
Probably separate it.
Okay, that's what I was figuring. Yeah.
Hopefully, things have moved sufficiently over to GraphQL that we're no longer doing all of the server-side Rails stuff that we're doing now.
Yeah,
and a lot of them are client-side calls. So again, just like the same thing at Eventbrite, the issue is figuring out authentication and CSRF. All those kind of nitty-gritty details that Rails is already handling for us, we'd have to redo in Node somehow.
That middleware stack.
Yep.
We know the pain. It is pain.
Next, can't you create API routes that like forwards that into Rails and then go back?
So we probably, that's the thing. So I don't know if we'll be able to 100% move over. It's like either we recreate it in Node or we have these little things that we can call in Rails to, okay, give me a CSRF token, or verify that this person is authenticated, or log this person in, like those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Right, sort of as a short term, so you can have both available.
Yeah, because it's not like we're going to get rid of the Rails part. That's going to exist for forever. So better not to do it twice.
I was going to say, like, is there a world in which you move towards, like, more, like, all of your front-end apps just being Node apps and not just talking only the Rails through the API stuff?
For all development purposes, probably, yeah. There may still be some middleware stuff that has to actually talk to Rails for it to deploy, but from the development side, my hope is that we have people working on the front end. Hopefully they're front-end engineers, but people working on the front end that are doing React and such, JavaScript, and then you have people on the back end writing GraphQL resolvers. And maybe people jump between both of those, but that's kind of like the separation of how it'll go.
Do you guys have any sort of accessibility checks or internationalization you need to put in place with the apps as well?
Yeah, so accessibility, we just now added Lighthouse CI. Mm-hmm. So we have the ability to have Lighthouse CI checks each PR, so it'll run it against Lighthouse and
Yep,
then fail
7
if it
minutes.
doesn't hit a certain bar
Play their
for
sister. I'm almost done.
performance,
Then we'll eat lunch.
for accessibility, etc. And then we have this job that runs every hour that runs against production, that runs Lighthouse, accessibility, and performance as well. So that tells us kind of where things are, and then we chart that in a Datadog graph there.
What are you guys using to run those jobs? Is that, did you say Circle CI for that one, or what?
Yeah,
Jenkins?
so,
okay.
Yeah, we're running them in Circle. So yet another repo that runs that job in Circle. So that's pretty cool because we get to see how it's changing over time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That way. Yeah.
Yeah, at Eventbrite, Vincent actually just did he built a Lighthouse runner in a Node app that has its own cron job. Like he used a cron library that schedules itself to run. I don't remember how often he does it. Like I think it's once an hour or something. And then he talks to the GitHub API to look for a performance.json file in all of the apps, and it has like a list of URLs to check. And then he runs the runner and queues up runs. So like it just literally is an actual queue data structure wise. And then as it runs, it takes the data and puts it into Splunk. And he did that all by himself, and it's effing awesome. Like I wish we could take what he did and like open source it as a product or something. It's really, really freaking cool. Lighthouse is amazing.
Hey Dad, I'll tell you why Everly.
Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of a similar idea to see those over time.
So now she's mad because I dumped it, and I thought you wouldn't like us playing.
And did you say you guys do use
thinking.
an internationalization library of some sort built in, or you?
Yeah, we're not gonna play with water.
The interesting thing is that so SysFix is only in United States and UK.
Okay.
And, which is really weird to see, like in apps. I'm just like, this has to be translated. How are you just putting the words right here? But really, it's like we have some things just for UK because UK, they like to say things differently.
Color with a U, probably.
That's one of them.
Yep.
It's like a shopping bag instead of a card, or other things that are interesting.
At Lonely Planet we had the same problem. We didn't have full internationalization, but it'd be like, if British, switch to color, basically. Color.
Yeah, so we have something like that. There is a hook that we're using that's wrapping something. I can't remember what package it is, but something that it puts something in the context, and we're able to read it out and then get which language or locale that we're in.
And are you in the middle of removing moment.js too?
We're not. That circled around and such, so that's something that the teams will need to do. But I feel like there's some package that we're using that uses moment, so it's kind of like you got it anyway.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a transient dependency for sure.
Yeah.
That's gonna be like the jQuery of date libraries. It's just like never gonna die, no matter how hard we try. It's always gonna be there.
We have repos that have both date FNF as well as moment.
Music's on TV.
Same repo. So
I have a PR that adds state functions to our mono repo, so that'll make it so we have both.
There you go. Yep. Let's just bring it all in. I think our Docker engine is already 850 megabytes. Why not just keep building it? See how quickly we can get to a gig. Cool. Well, dude, all right, I know we got 3 minutes left, so it's just a time check. Is there any other final questions for Ben?
Do you have a book recommendation?
Your picks of the week. Who's going to win the NBA Finals?
Yeah, this isn't the Adventures in Angular, React, whatever podcast.
Yeah.
Time for picks.
How nice is your closet now? Your clothes selection. Now that you joined Mix.
So it's actually, the problem is that we had a pandemic shortly after. So it's my wife who's been using it. I gave her my Stitch Fix discount, so.
Nice.
Hers is nicer.
I think my wife would want me to work at Stitch Fix just for that, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we do have openings.
Shameless plug.
We'll just put
We
that
are
out.
hiring.
Let me just put that out there. There is a way to solve that problem.
Careers.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. That's hilarious.
Well, thank you very much. This was awesome. Really,
Yeah.
really
Great.
informative.
So obviously
Who
we'll.
are we doing next?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. I'll have to put the word out in the channel and maybe voluntold someone. But hopefully we'll get a volunteer. I'll probably try to schedule it for we're really like maybe late October, maybe early November. I don't know. We'll see how scheduling works out. How do I sing hi? It's everyone.
I'll ping
my daughters.
I'll ping the parcel group again and see if we can get Atlassian to present.
Oh yeah, that'd be really killer. I'd love to get them in here too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will. I'll definitely set it up and throw it in the throw an Eventbrite event out. You can subscribe to the Div Ops Eventbrite organization on Eventbrite too, just to kind of stay in touch with us on that.
Yep.
See.
I'm gonna need your Eventbrite events to be better, Jonathan.
Yeah, I need to put a little bit more work in there.
Yeah.
I'm clearly not a
sentence.
designer. So I need to get some brand. Maybe I'm sure somebody internal can help me brand that up a little bit better.
Once I move, I can restart my Adobe subscription and help
There
you
you
out,
go.
Jonathan.
Get some logos going. I mean, we've got the logo from David.
We got the logo. I think
just
we need
more
some like
content.
fancy.
Yeah.
Fancy.
I shared it out here, and everybody was like, "What is this?" There's like nothing that explains what this is.
That's my bad.
I was like, "No, well, there's a Slack group, so there's all this behind the
Just
scenes."
read the blog post on his blog. It's fun.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. DivOps. It's a thing.
The blog post not linked in the event description.
It is, isn't it? Isn't it? Is it not? Oh man, it's on the organization page. It links to the. Anyway, we'll figure it out.
Jonathan, you got to work on your PR skills.
I do.
exactly.
Yeah, my PR skills are bad. Hey, at least I got this. We got this thing going here. Now we just gotta. We got it working, and now we need to refactor it. That's my new mantra in life. Get it working and refactor it.
Agile technique.
That's right. We're agiling the DevOps group. So awesome. Well, thanks y'all. Enjoy. Yeah, that's right. Always, we're delivering value early and often to our, and then we'll add more features as we go. Okay, we'll see y'all next time. I've got
y'all.
recording, and I'll see that later.
Bye.
Everybody says bye too. Say bye.
Thanks so much. Good to see you.
See ya.
Yeah, good to see you too, Barrett.
Mommy's not coming. Oh, she is coming. There she is. You were right. How about that? Perfect timing. All right, bye.